Why hard selling fails in modern B2B. Let me start with a confession. Years ago, early in my sales career, I walked into a meeting with a potential client, a mid-size logistics company looking to upgrade their operations software. I had my pitch deck ready. I had my closing lines rehearsed. I had my objection rebuttals memorized like scripture. And I went in there and I did what I was trained to do. I pushed. I presented feature after feature. I name-dropped competitors who had already signed on. I created urgency. I leaned in with that classic line. If we don't move on this today, I can't guarantee the same pricing next quarter. And you know what happened. The room went cold. The VP of operations, a sharp, composed woman in her 50s, looked at me across the table and she said something I will never forget. She said, "You've been talking for 30 minutes and you haven't asked me a single question about my business." She was right. I hadn't, not one. I walked out of that meeting without a deal, without a follow-up, and honestly, without much dignity. But I walked out with something far more valuable. I walked out with a lesson that fundamentally changed how I think about selling, especially in the B2B world. And that lesson is what I want to talk about today. Because here's the thing. That approach I used, that hard-charging, high-pressure, feature-dumping, urgency manufacturing style of selling, it used to work. Or at least, people thought it worked. There was a time when the salesperson held the information advantage. You knew things the buyer didn't. You controlled the narrative. You could shape perception because the client had limited access to alternatives, limited access to reviews, limited access to industry benchmarks. That world is gone. It's been gone for a while now, but a surprising number of salespeople, sales teams, and even entire organizations haven't caught up. They're still operating on a playbook that was written for a marketplace that no longer exists. And they're wondering why their close rates are dropping, why their pipeline is full of ghosts, why prospects go silent after the second meeting, why deals stall out at the proposal stage and never come back. So let's talk about it. Let's really dig into why hard selling fails in modern B2B, not just at a surface level, not just buyers don't like being pushed, but at a structural, psychological, strategic level. Because once you understand the deeper mechanics of why this approach breaks down, you'll never want to go back to it. And more importantly, you'll discover that the alternative isn't just more ethical. It's more effective. It's more profitable. And honestly, it's a lot more enjoyable. Let me set the stage with some context. When we talk about B2B sales, we're talking about a fundamentally different animal than B2C in consumer sales. You're often dealing with impulse, emotion, personal desire. Someone sees a jacket they love, they feel something, they buy it. The decision cycle can be seconds. The stakes are relatively low. The buyer is spending their own money on their own wants. B2B is nothing like that. In B2B, you're dealing with multiple decision makers. You're dealing with committees, with procurement departments, with legal review, with budget approval chains that can stretch across 3 continents. You're dealing with buyers who are spending other people's money, which means they're accountable. They have to justify every dollar. They have to defend every vendor choice. They have to explain to their board, to their CEO, to their shareholders why they chose you over the other four companies that pitched last month. Now think about that for a second. If you're a buyer in that environment and a salesperson walks in and starts pressuring you, what are you going to feel? You're going to feel disrespected. You're going to feel like this person doesn't understand your world. You're going to feel like they're trying to manipulate you into a decision that you'll have to defend later, and they won't be there to help you defend it. They'll be off celebrating their commission while you're sitting in a boardroom explaining why you rushed into a contract. That's the fundamental disconnect. Hard selling treats the buyer as an obstacle to overcome. Modern B2B requires you to treat the buyer as a partner to empower. Let me say that again because it's important. Hard selling treats the buyer as an obstacle. Modern B2B requires you to treat the buyer as a partner. And this isn't just philosophy. This isn't just be nice to people. There are concrete, structural reasons why pressure tactics collapse in today's B2B environment. Let me walk through them. The first reason is information symmetry. 20 years ago, the salesperson was the primary source of product information. If you wanted to know about a software solution, an industrial component, a consulting service, you had to talk to a rep. They controlled what you knew. They could frame the conversation. They could highlight strengths, minimize weaknesses, and shape your perception of the competitive landscape. Today, by the time a B2B buyer talks to you, they've already done 70% of their research. They've read your website, your competitors' websites, third-party review platforms, industry analyst reports, LinkedIn posts from people who have used your product, Reddit threads comparing you to alternatives. They probably know your pricing tiers. They might even know your recent customer churn rate. So when you walk in and start your pitch like you're revealing sacred knowledge, you look out of touch. When you create artificial urgency, they see through it because they know your competitor isn't running a limited-time offer. When you exaggerate your capabilities, they've already read the honest reviews. When you dodge questions about weaknesses, they already know what those weaknesses are. The information advantage that made hard selling viable is gone. The buyer is no longer in the dark. And when you try to sell to an informed buyer using tactics designed for an uninformed one, you don't come across as persuasive. You come across as either dishonest or clueless. Neither of those builds trust, and trust is the currency of B2B sales. The second reason hard selling fails is the complexity of modern buying decisions. Here's something that a lot of traditional sales training misses entirely. In today's B2B environment, the biggest competitor you face is not another vendor. It's the status quo. It's the decision to do nothing. Study after study shows that a massive percentage of B2B deals don't end with the buyer choosing a competitor. They end with the buyer choosing not to decide. The deal stalls. It gets tabled. It gets pushed to next quarter, then next year, then it quietly dies. Why does this happen? Because modern B2B purchases are risky. They involve organizational change. Implementing a new software system means retraining teams, migrating data, disrupting workflows. Switching suppliers means new contracts, new logistics, new quality assurance processes. Bringing in a new consulting firm means exposing internal problems to outsiders. Every one of these decisions carries risk, and the bigger the purchase, the higher the risk. Now, when a buyer is weighing all of this risk and a salesperson comes in with high-pressure tactics, what happens? The pressure actually amplifies the buyer's anxiety. Instead of making the buyer more likely to act, it makes them more likely to retreat. The fight or flight response kicks in. And in a corporate setting, flight doesn't look like running out of the room. It looks like, let me think about it, or I need to run this by my team, or can you send me the proposal and I'll review it next week. These are polite ways of saying, you just made me more scared of this decision, not less. Hard selling creates the exact emotional response that kills deals. It manufactures anxiety in an environment that already has too much anxiety. And then salespeople wonder why the client went dark. The client didn't go dark. The client went into self-protection mode. You pushed, and they retreated. That's basic human psychology. The approach that actually works is the opposite. Instead of amplifying anxiety, you reduce it. You become the person who helps the buyer navigate the complexity. You become the guide, the advisor, the person who says, I understand this is a big decision. Let me help you think through it clearly. That's not weakness. That's sophistication. That's what a real professional does. The third reason hard selling fails in modern B2B is reputation velocity. In the old world, if you burned a client with aggressive tactics, the damage was contained. They might tell a few colleagues. They might badmouth you at an industry event, but the blast radius was limited. Today, one bad experience can ripple through an entire industry in hours. LinkedIn posts about vendor experiences go viral. Industry Slack channels and Discord servers share horror stories in real time. Review platforms aggregate buyer feedback for the world to see. Procurement leaders talk to each other across companies. They share vendor scorecards. They compare notes. Your reputation now travels at the speed of the internet. And in B2B, where deal sizes are large and buying committees are interconnected, a damaged reputation doesn't just cost you one deal. It can close entire market segments. I know a software company, I won't name them, but they were known in their industry for aggressive sales tactics. Their reps would call relentlessly. They'd use guilt trips on prospects. They'd pressure early-stage leads into demos they weren't ready for. They'd drop prices dramatically at the end of the quarter, which trained buyers to never pay full price. What happened? Within 2 years, the buyer community in their vertical started sharing a list. Not a formal list, just an informal one. A whisper network. Don't take their call until the last week of the quarter. You'll get 40% off. Their reps will say anything to close. They oversold to us, and the implementation was a nightmare. The company's pipeline didn't dry up overnight. It eroded, slowly, consistently, like water wearing through stone. By the time they realized what was happening, the damage was baked into their market position. And recovering from a reputation deficit is 10 times harder than building a reputation in the first place. Hard selling in the modern B2B world isn't just ineffective in the moment. It creates compounding reputational damage that gets harder and harder to reverse. The fourth reason, and this one is deeply important to me personally, is that hard selling attracts the wrong clients and repels the right ones. Think about who responds to high-pressure tactics. It's usually buyers who are either unsophisticated, desperate, or easily manipulated. These are not the clients you want. These are the clients who will churn fastest, complain loudest, negotiate hardest on renewals, and never refer you to anyone. The clients you actually want, the high-value, long-term, enterprise-grade clients who will grow with you, refer others to you, and become the foundation of a sustainable business, those clients are repelled by pressure. They've seen it all. They have options. They don't need you. And the moment you start pushing, they categorize you mentally as not a serious partner. I have a philosophy about this that took me years to learn. Low-end marketing doesn't showcase your real value. Trying to pressure or convince people who don't see your worth is a losing game. The right move is to position yourself where people who genuinely understand quality will find you. To operate at a level where your professionalism speaks for itself. To put yourself in rooms where pressure tactics would be laughable. High-quality B2B clients don't want to be sold to. They want to be understood. They want a partner who diagnoses before prescribing. They want someone who asks, "What are you actually trying to achieve?" before they say, "Here's what you should buy." And this brings me to what I believe is the most important point in this entire conversation. The alternative to hard selling is not soft selling. It's not being passive. It's not sitting back and hoping the client decides on their own. The alternative is what I call needs-based engagement, and it is both more principled and more powerful than anything pressure tactics can achieve. Here's how it works. Instead of walking into a meeting with a pitch, you walk in with questions. Instead of leading with your product, you lead with curiosity about their business. Instead of creating urgency artificially, you help the client discover their own urgency organically. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you sell cybersecurity solutions to mid-market companies. The hard sell approach would be to walk in and say, "Data breaches are up 300%. Companies like yours are getting hit every day. If you don't act now, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Here's our platform, here are the features, and I can get you a discount if you sign this quarter." Sounds reasonable, right? Lots of salespeople do exactly this, and it mostly fails. Here's why. The client already knows breaches are up. They've read the same headlines you have. You're not telling them anything new. You're just adding another voice to the noise. And the urgency you're creating feels manufactured because, well, it is. Now, here's the needs-based approach. You walk in and you say, "I'd love to understand how your team currently thinks about security risk. What does your current setup look like? What are you most confident about and what keeps you up at night?" Then you listen, really listen, not listen for an opening to pitch, listen, actually listen. And what you'll often discover is that the client has specific, nuanced concerns that no generic pitch could address. Maybe their worry isn't external breaches at all. Maybe it's insider threats because they just went through a round of layoffs and morale is low. Maybe it's compliance. because they're expanding into European markets and GDPR requirements are giving their legal team nightmares. Maybe it's board pressure, because a competitor got breached last month and now the board wants a report on their security posture by next Friday. When you understand the real situation, the real concerns, the real internal dynamics, you can offer something a hard sell pitch never could. You can offer relevance. You can connect your solution to their specific pain, in their specific context, with their specific constraints. And here's the magic. When you do this well, you don't have to create urgency. The urgency already exists. You just help them see it clearly. You held up a mirror and said, "Here's what your situation actually looks like. Here are the gaps, here are the risks, and here's how we can help you close them." That's not selling. That's consulting. That's advising. That's being a genuine partner. And it closes deals at rates that hard selling can only dream of because the client feels understood rather than pressured. They feel empowered rather than manipulated. They feel like the decision is theirs, which means they'll defend it internally. They'll champion it through the approval process, and they'll follow through on implementation. Let me share something else that I've observed over years of both selling and building tools for salespeople. The best B2B salespeople I've ever met, the ones who consistently hit quota, who build massive books of business, who get called first when a client has a new need, they all share one characteristic. They are genuinely curious about their clients' businesses, not performatively curious, not "I'll ask a question so I can pivot to my pitch" curious. Genuinely, authentically interested in understanding what the client is trying to build, what obstacles they're facing, what their industry looks like, what keeps them motivated, what worries them. This curiosity creates a dynamic that pressure can never create. It creates a relationship where the client actually wants to share information with you. Because when someone is truly interested in your challenges, you open up. You tell them things you wouldn't tell a salesperson. You share the real budget, not the official budget. You reveal the internal politics, the competing priorities, the hidden stakeholders who need to be convinced. And all of that information is exactly what you need to position your solution effectively and close the deal. But you only get it through trust. You only get it through genuine engagement. You will never, ever get it through pressure. Hard selling doesn't just fail to build trust. It actively destroys the conditions under which trust can form. It puts the client on the defensive. And a defensive client doesn't share information. They withhold it. They give you the sanitized version. They tell you what they think you want to hear so they can get you out of the room faster. And then you go back to your office and you build a proposal based on incomplete, inaccurate information, and you wonder why it doesn't land. This is the vicious cycle of hard selling. Pressure leads to defensiveness. Defensiveness leads to information withholding. Information withholding leads to misaligned proposals. Misaligned proposals lead to deal stalls. Deal stalls lead to more pressure. More pressure leads to client withdrawal. Client withdrawal leads to lost deals. And lost deals lead to the salesperson concluding that they just need to push harder next time. It's a death spiral. And the only way out is to break the cycle at the very beginning. Stop pushing. Start understanding. Now, I want to address something that I know some of you are thinking, because I thought it too when I first started shifting my approach. But Jay, if I don't push, won't I lose deals to competitors who do push? Won't the aggressive rep from the other company come in and close the deal while I'm still building rapport? It's a fair concern, and here's my honest answer. Sometimes, yes. In the short term, there will be deals where an aggressive competitor closes faster because they pressured the client into a quick decision. That happens. I won't pretend it doesn't, but here's what also happens. Those pressure-closed deals have higher churn rates. They have lower satisfaction scores. They have worse implementation outcomes because the client wasn't fully committed to begin with. They were pressured into a decision they weren't ready for, and that resentment shows up later. It shows up in half-hearted adoption. It shows up in contentious renewal negotiations. It shows up in the client quietly evaluating alternatives 6 months in. Meanwhile, the deals you close through genuine understanding and partnership, those clients stay, they expand, they refer. They become your marketing team, your case studies, your proof points. One quality deal closed through trust is worth 5 deals closed through pressure, not just financially but strategically. Because that one client becomes the foundation for your next 10 clients. I've seen this play out in my own career. The clients I won through patient, needs-based engagement are still with me. Some have been with me for years. They've introduced me to colleagues at other companies. They've become advocates. And the compounding value of those relationships has far exceeded anything I could have achieved by pressuring people into quick decisions. There's an old saying that I think captures this perfectly. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. In B2B sales, hard selling is going fast. Needs-based selling is going far. Let me talk about another dimension of this that doesn't get discussed enough. The impact of hard selling on the salesperson themselves. I've worked with a lot of salespeople over the years, both as a peer and as someone who builds training tools for sales teams. And I can tell you that the people who rely on pressure tactics are, almost universally, the most stressed, the most burned out, and the most cynical people in the profession. And it makes sense when you think about it. If your job is to overcome resistance, every day is a battle. Every call is a confrontation. Every meeting is a fight. You're constantly bracing for rejection, constantly managing your emotional state, constantly trying to manufacture enthusiasm for a process that feels adversarial. That's exhausting, and over time it corrodes you. It makes you cynical about clients, about your product, about the profession itself. I've seen talented, energetic salespeople turn into bitter, jaded shells of themselves because they spent years in environments that rewarded pressure over partnership. The needs-based approach is not just better for clients. It's better for you. When your job is to understand people and help them solve real problems, work becomes genuinely engaging. When a client thanks you for helping them think through a complex decision, that feels good. When you close a deal because the client genuinely believes your solution is the right fit, that feels good. When you get a referral because a client told their colleague, "You need to talk to my person, they really get it," that feels incredible. That's sustainable. That's the kind of career you can sustain for decades without burning out. That's the kind of work that gives you energy instead of draining it. And this connects to something I believe deeply. Every day should be a day where you work for the joy of it, where you find genuine satisfaction in what you do, where the process itself is rewarding, not just the outcome. Hard selling makes that impossible because the process is inherently unpleasant. You're fighting, pushing, manipulating. Even when you win, you don't feel great about how you won. Needs-based selling aligns the process with the outcome. The way you sell feels good. The results feel good. The relationships feel good. And that positive cycle feeds itself. When you enjoy what you do it better. When you do it better, you get better results. When you get better results, you enjoy it more. It's an upward spiral, the exact opposite of the death spiral I described earlier. Let me talk about one more structural reason why hard selling fails in modern B2B. And this is one that a lot of people overlook. The modern B2B buying process is increasingly non-linear and decentralized. In the old model, there was a relatively clean sales funnel: prospect, qualify, present, propose, close. The salesperson guided the buyer through each stage in a predictable sequence. Hard selling worked within this model because you could control the flow. You knew where the buyer was in the process, and you could apply pressure at the right moments. Today's B2B buying journey looks nothing like that. Buyers jump in and out of the process at random. They might attend a webinar, then disappear for 3 months, then download a white paper, then ask a colleague for a recommendation, then show up at your booth at a trade show, then go silent again, then suddenly reach out asking for a demo because their current vendor just raised prices. You can't control that. You can't predict it, and you definitely can't pressure it. If you try to force a linear selling process onto a non-linear buying process, you create friction. You email the prospect 2 days after the webinar with a "Did you have a chance to think about our conversation?" And they haven't thought about it at all because they were dealing with a supply chain crisis. You follow up again a week later and now you're noise. You call them and they don't pick up because they don't recognize the number. You send a LinkedIn message and they feel stalked. This is what hard selling looks like in the modern context. It's not just ineffective, it's actively annoying. And annoying your prospects is a remarkably poor business strategy. What works instead is what I call being present without being pushy. It means creating value that the prospect can engage with on their own terms, on their own timeline. It means sharing insights, being helpful, being visible, and being ready when they're ready. When a prospect finally raises their hand and says, "Okay, I think we might need to do something about this," and you've been consistently providing value without pressure, you're the first person they call. Not because you pushed the hardest, but because you positioned yourself as the most helpful. You were the one who sent that article about industry trends that helped them make a case to their board. You were the one who answered their question at the conference without trying to close. You were the one who felt safe. Safe. That's a word you don't hear much in sales training, but it might be the most important word in B2B selling. The buyer needs to feel safe with you. safe to share their real challenges, safe to admit they don't have all the answers, safe to bring you into the internal conversation without worrying that you'll start pressuring their colleagues. Hard selling is the antithesis of safety. It creates threat, and humans don't make good decisions when they feel threatened. They make defensive decisions. They make short-term decisions. They make get this person out of my office decisions. Now I want to be very clear about something. When I say stop hard selling, I am not saying stop selling. There's a critical distinction here that gets lost in the conversation sometimes. Needs-based selling is not passive. It's not just asking questions and hoping for the best. It requires tremendous skill. It requires the discipline to keep quiet when you want to pitch. It requires the emotional intelligence to read a room and adjust in real time. It requires the business acumen to connect a client's concerns to your solution in a way that feels organic rather than forced. It requires the courage to ask hard questions. Questions like, what happens if you don't solve this problem? What's the actual cost of inaction? That last one is important, because one of the most powerful things you can do as a B2B salesperson is help the client see the cost of their current path. Not by scaring them, not by manufacturing fear, but by genuinely helping them quantify what their current situation is costing them in money, time, risk, opportunity cost, competitive disadvantage. When a client discovers for themselves that their current approach is costing them $2 million a year in inefficiency, they don't need you to pressure them into buying. They pressure themselves. The urgency becomes internal. It becomes real. And real urgency, self-discovered urgency, is 1,000 times more powerful than manufactured urgency. This is the art of modern B2B selling. You're not the pusher. You're the mirror. You help people see what they couldn't see on their own, and then you help them do something about it. Let me share one more thought that I think ties all of this together. In my work building AI-powered tools for sales training, I spend a lot of time thinking about what makes salespeople successful in the long run. Not just for one quarter, but over a career. And what I've concluded is that the sustainable competitive advantage in sales is not technique, it's not scripts, it's not closing tricks, it's character. It's the kind of person you are when no one is watching. It's whether you genuinely care about your client's outcome or just your commission. It's whether you have the integrity to say, honestly, I don't think we're the right fit for this particular need, but let me refer you to someone who might be. That last one blows people's minds when I say it. You'd refer a prospect to a competitor. Yes, absolutely. Because when you do that, two things happen. First, the prospect trusts you at a level that money can't buy. They know you put their interests first. And the next time they have a need that does fit your solution, you're the first call. Second, the competitor you referred them to now owes you a professional courtesy. The ecosystem starts working in your favor. Hard selling would never allow for that kind of move. Hard selling says, close everything. Never let a prospect walk away. Every lead is a potential deal, and you need to push until you get a yes or a definitive no. That mindset treats every interaction as transactional. Modern B2B rewards relational thinking. And the difference between those two worldviews is the difference between a career of struggle and a career of abundance. I want to close with something personal. I'm a salesperson myself. I sell my skills, my ideas, my software, my perspective to the world. Every time I create a piece of content, every time I present my AI training tools, every time I engage with a potential client, I'm selling. And I've learned that the most powerful sales tool I have is not my technology, not my pitch deck, not my closing technique. It's my genuine interest in helping people grow. When I sit down with a sales team and I ask them, "What's your biggest challenge right now?" And I actually listen, and I actually care, and I actually think about how my tools might help them, or just as importantly, how they might not, something shifts. The conversation becomes real. The walls come down. The relationship begins. And from that foundation, everything becomes possible. Deals close, partnerships form, referrals flow, not because I pushed, but because I served. That's the future of B2B sales. Not pressure, partnership, not manipulation, understanding, not hard selling, smart selling, human selling. The clients worth having don't want to be closed. They want to be understood. They want someone who takes the time to diagnose before prescribing. They want a professional who has the confidence to let the process unfold, who doesn't need to force an outcome because they trust that genuine value, delivered with genuine care, will always find its way to the people who need it. So if you're out there right now, grinding through calls, forcing urgency, pressuring prospects, and wondering why it feels so exhausting and why the results don't match the effort, I want you to know that there's another way. A better way. A way that's not just more effective, but more sustainable, more enjoyable, and more aligned with the kind of person you actually want to be. Stop pushing. Start understanding. The results will follow. And the beautiful irony is this. When you stop trying so hard to close, you start closing more. When you stop trying to convince, people start convincing themselves. When you stop performing confidence, you start feeling it, because you know your approach is built on substance, not theater. That's not just a better sales strategy. That's a better way to build a career. That's a better way to build a business. And honestly, that's a better way to live. Thanks for spending this time with me today. If this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and keep the conversation going in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.